very famous flood story from the book of Genesis, from Noah, and also in the context of this week's Parsha, Kehilah, which lists among many, many mitzvot, all of which, of course, Ben's going to speak about tomorrow morning. All 74 of the 613 mitzvot, over 10% of the mitzvot, are in this week's Parsha. A lot of these mitzvot have to do with relationships, community building, and how it is that we deal with each other, how it is that we treat each other, and how it is that ultimately we settle not only arguments among people within a community by way of batei din and making sure that there are fair judges who pursue justice, as we learned about last week, but how it is that we as a community ultimately do the work of God. And that is parallel to the message of Noah. Now, everyone remembers the story of Noah and the flood. And unfortunately, over time, the story has been used as a means to glorifying, if you will, the flood. The stories that we tell our children, these romantic stories of Noah and his family entering the ark, and 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and the animals by twosies, and all of the cute things. Well, we have a petting farm, petting zoo sometimes for the kids during the story of Noah, and so on and so forth. We romanticize it, but this week, just like every time there's a natural disaster like a hurricane in our country, but this week especially because the predictions and the models are saying it's going to go on and on and on for at least another 2 weeks, this has been so heart-wrenching for us. Not that Katrina wasn't and Iris wasn't and all of the other hurricanes that we've lived through, but there's something in particular this week that has been very difficult to just swallow as we watch it on television. The story of Noah concludes, the story of the flood concludes with God telling Noah to leave the ark. And many of us wonder what Noah must have been feeling after 40 days and 40 nights. The non-romantic version of the story is that the entirety of the earth was destroyed. Everyone was killed. So it wasn't as cute as we teach it or think about it. Noah probably had to, as he was in the ark, there was only one tiny window that he and his family could look through, probably saw the devastation right away. And the Torah does not account for this. The Torah doesn't say, and Moses walked out of the ark, or in the case of the Torah, God shows him the way out, which indicates that he was traumatized. Why couldn't he just walk out? Why does God have to show him the way after the flood off the ark? The rabbis in their commentaries say because he was so traumatized by all the death and devastation and destruction that he saw, that God kind of had to open Noah's eyes for him, symbolically, not literally or physically, but in that way that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sort of like how many of us who watch it on television, let alone those who are there to see what they're seeing. But the question is, in the aftermath of the flood, what does Noah do? Just like the question for us, anytime this happens, but particularly this week in the aftermath, what do we do? Noah does not do what a lot of us, I think, including myself, do. Typically we think, is God sending a message? Why does God create natural events or weather phenomena like hurricanes? Why is God punishing us? Why do the innocent have to be destroyed and lose everything? These are normal human questions after a tragedy to ask. And Noah is just as traumatized as anyone because he probably also has that added bonus, if you will, of survivor's guilt. God opens his eyes, walks him off the ark. We look at what we look at and see what we see, and it would not be unnatural for us to question the existence of a compassionate and just and loving God after seeing the pictures that we've seen over these last few days. But Noah doesn't do that. What Noah does is he builds an altar. And it says in the Torah, Noah built an altar to Adonai, taking of every pure animal and every pure bird, and he offered burnt offerings at the altar. In essence, at the end of this devastation that we learn, Noah, or we infer Noah is traumatized from, he prays. And he not only prays, but he offers an olah offering. An offering that is meant to have a smell, a sweet smell, like barbecue. It's Labor Day weekend. I thought I'd throw that in there, but that's what it was. It was a burnt offering. Not a burnt offering. It was an olah offering, where the sweet smell is supposed to rise to God, and God is supposed to accept it. So Noah doesn't ask questions about the existence of God, or why do bad things happen to good people, or why are all these people suffering, the innocent, along with those who were Hamas, who were violent and evil. And then the Torah says that Adonai smelled that odor, reach nichoach, this wonderful smell. And Adonai said in his own heart, in God's own heart, as if to say in a moment of divine self-reflection, never again will I doom the earth because of humanity, since the devising of the human minds are evil from their youth, from their childhood, nor will I ever again destroy every living being as I have done. God has this moment of self-reflection, as I said, divine self-reflection, almost as if God is praying to himself and thinks, okay, I get it. I'm not going to destroy the earth by flood again. I'm never going to do that again because I now understand that human beings are going to be eternally flawed, and there will be human beings who are evil, and this is no way to go about eliminating them. That's one interpretation. But then there's this poem that we always skip over in shul, and I'm sorry, maybe this year we'll read it, where God, it's like words of poetry that God says. So long as the earth endures, so long as the earth is around, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. It's as if the first statement and the last statement are paradoxical. Well, it's not as if, they are paradoxical. So long as the earth endures, the earth shall not cease. What kind of statement is that? So long as the earth endures, it won't cease? That makes a lot of sense. That's like me saying, as long as I'm alive, I won't be dead. It's not that different on the surface. But if we dig a little deeper, there are two pretty salvific moments in that story. And this is the prism through which I hope we will reflect during these days, these very, very tragic and traumatic days in our nation and in our human world with Harvey. I hope we can reflect on the salvific lessons, and maybe that will help us come to an answer that is not satisfying, but at least satisfactory as to why these things happen, why tragedies happen. First, there's something salvific about the flood. That doesn't sound like something that will give anyone comfort right now in the aftermath of Harvey, but in the flood story, as we read it in the Torah and understand it, there is something salvific about the flood because water purifies. We go to a mikvah to purify or to transition or to make holy ourselves through water. And there's two very profound statements that come from this moment of salvation at the end of the flood, where Noah's offering a sacrifice, praying to God, giving thanks. One, he builds the altar, as if the world was now reset. This sacrifice that Noah gives symbolizes this, if you will, restoration of harmony between God and humanity. It reflects, Noah is grateful that he and his family were saved. Many of us go impulsively to a place of blame or anger toward God or questioning God's existence when we see devastation, when we see trauma. And maybe Noah is teaching us that, yes, that's okay, be traumatized, to see destruction and devastation. Yet he prays, not only to acknowledge that there are certain things, like nature, that are greater than us as humans, and that continue to go on whether we want them to or not, to acknowledge the existence of God, not as God, the punisher, but as the force of nature which exists before us and after us eternally, Maybe he's thankful because he's acknowledging that we are all mortal. And mostly, he is grateful. He offers this sacrifice. This was good meat, guys. This wasn't the shvach at the bottom of the barrel. It was the finest. That instead of consuming it himself, he would give it to God. He gave until it hurt as a way of saying thanks to God. And I know it seems paradoxical, oxymoronic, that in a moment of devastation, he would give this great gift of thanks. That's number one. Number two, in a very rare moment in the Torah, God is self-reflective. We don't see that much in the Torah where God actually goes inward and thinks something through and comes out on the other side and basically says, I made a mistake. Only do we see that when Moses calls God on something or Abraham calls God on something. And so in this rare moment, God decides never to destroy the earth again by flood. But I think the real answer to the question, well, what happens next, which Noah must have been asking, what do we do now? Where do I go from here? In its aftermath is this idea in this great, profound, and uplifting poem at the end of the narrative, which is, so long as the earth endures, which teaches us, God is teaching us in this moment of self-reflection that is really profound, that there is no guarantee that we are safe and should feel safe, but we're never really safe when it regards nature and the order of the cosmos and the natural world. There is no guarantee that life as we know it lasts forever, that our homes last forever, that our belongings last forever. There is no guarantee. And I think God reflects that in saying, so long as the earth endures. It's not, the earth will endure forever and I won't destroy the world by flood, so long as the earth endures, which implies, I would say it's a little bit explicit, that nothing lasts forever. Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, all of these times and seasons, God teaches us that seasons, weather, climate change, the balance of nature and human innovation and corruption of the environment, that it is on us, that it is not on God. Because God says paradoxically, I won't destroy the world by flood again, but paradoxically is saying, implying, neither will I save the world. Neither will I save these humans who have been evil since their youth from themselves. I'm not talking about climate change or global warming in a debate. I'm telling you, it is indeed, according to our tradition, a reflection of the corruption and evil that exists. That isn't to say that people get punished for the wrongdoing of others. But when nature behaves the way it does, in a cosmic, almost Kabbalistic way, it is a reflection of the verkehrtness, the upside-downness of human behavior. In other words, that seasons, as I said, weather, climate change, balance of nature, when it goes imbalance, when it is imbalanced, this is one of the outcomes possibly. But then God says something amazing, that it shall not cease. Remember that paradox? So long as earth endures, it shall not cease. So long as I'm alive, I won't be dead. God teaches us that the cycles of nature will never again be corrupted by God. God will not interfere one way or the other, cause the flood or keep the flood from happening. God is saying both in that statement. It's good news and it's bad news. God's not to destroy the earth again by flood, but God also promises never to intervene again in that ongoing ebb and flow of nature should we get ourselves into a bind. It's been a rough few days. It's been a terrible, terrible, unbelievable, and unspeakable tragedy for people who live in Houston and in Beaumont. The pictures of people, patients, dialysis patients from a hospital getting evacuated on helicopters to go somewhere else because there's no drinking water. Unbelievable. And as someone who has experienced natural disasters, who lived through the earthquake of 1989 in Northern California, I can tell you that nature, in a sense, doesn't have a conscience. It's not thinking in terms of who, as nature, are we harming. Like, this is what happens. This is what happens. The question for us is the same question that Noah probably had to ask himself, is what do we do now? See, I really believe it's been, in many ways, an amazing and beautiful week of heroes and giving and tzedakah and compassion and love. I sent an email out on Monday. Already, I've received $5,400 of donations to give to Congregation Beth Israel in Houston in like 3 or 4 days, with barely even through an email. The millions of dollars that are pouring in. People, we have our camp nurse from camp, Stein, is flying to Texas to help as a nurse, to go help. But guys, it really matters a month from now, and 3 months from now, and a year from now as much as it matters this week. I think that's where we will find ourselves asking ourselves, as Noah did, what should we do next? Complain, or argue, or debate, or forget about it, even worse? Or should we continue to be active participants with God and with our community? Finally, the Talmud teaches us, Ein Ra she'ein ba tov, that nothing that has bad, nothing bad that happens, or that has evil or chaos or trauma, cannot have something good within it. There's nothing good about tragedy. There's nothing good about this kind of trauma. There's nothing good. But there is good that can come from it. And again, my prayer on this Shabbat is that that good comes from our hearts. Not just this week, but in a month and in 6 months and a year, to bring our country and all of humanity closer. Because our message on this Shabbat, of all messages, as we are in Elul, the month of repentance, is we are going to do so much better together than we are splitting apart. Let us pray that this water, this terrible, terrible water that has ruined so much, will, on the other side of it, through our endeavors, have a level of purity to it as well, to reset humanity, to bring us closer together, all of us together. Let us be that salvific force. Shabbat Shalom.